Good evening, friends. We'll continue on and chat about experiences in the darkroom that I have had. Largely, these will be around the most recent several months in darkness, and then also the other one that was several months long. So, darkness in general. As I shared, I went from being quite frightened about having 45 minutes in a float tank all in the dark to exploring days and then weeks and then months. And so from my experience anyway, wow, that is a big, interesting kind of like some sort of bug has built a huge nest there. From my experience, darkness is really quite soft and gentle. If we think about it right now, light is in some ways quite harsh. If I shine a bright light into someone's eyes, it can feel quite harsh. But if someone turns off the lights all of a sudden in the evening time, it doesn't feel harsh. And right now, there are so many, I don't even know, billions of pieces of information that the mind can be is taking in right now. I don't know that there's any other option but taking in all of this information. Whereas in the darkness, there's not that much information coming in visually. And the eyes don't have anything to focus on. At the same time, being in a dark room, I just move slower than I do normally because I can't see where I'm going. And so the senses do increase somewhat, and sense of touch. I will use feet a lot, kind of moving along slowly. And if you remember, in the kuti itself, I had different pieces of cloth, like I would put one by the bed, I had one around that center pole, there was a mat by the entrance into the bathroom, and there was the big floor covering. And so I will maneuver based off of sense of touch with the feet a lot. And so I'm just moving slowly. So I'm not taking in lots of information in the eyes, I'm moving slowly. And then at the same time, I have no clock. I have no to-do list. And so the mind isn't kind of looking for the next thing. So for me, generally, time in darkroom is really relaxing and really soft and gentle. As I said, the senses, they change a bit for me. It's not like super drastic of all of a sudden I'm just, I've got this amazing seventh sense or something. It seemed like I would at least give more attention to smelling. I would be able to smell just some fragrances of the fruit wafting in from where it had been set, or the different foods. And coming up towards a solid thing like a wall, there is some sort of sensation. If I come right here and I'm just walking, I could feel it. Not so much right now, but in the dark room, can definitely feel it. And I would assume that's like the electromagnetic field bouncing off of the solidity or something. I'm sure somebody else knows. And so moving slowly, coming up towards it, and I could come in the evening times when it was dark out, I would go into the hallway and I would walk the hallway back and forth. And it got to where I could walk without touching the walls, walking, and then turn, walking, and then turn, like this. And I could do that and maybe touch the walls a little bit. I would also put my hands out sometimes if I'm walking faster and whatnot. But I might come over here and I could tell, oh, there's the wall there, without touching it. I could just feel that. So that happens. The visuals, as I said, it is thought by, there's the theory about what's happening with tryptophan. It is tryptophan going into melatonin, to serotonin, to melatonin, and all the way to DMT, and so these visuals. So I experience visuals, but to me it's nowhere. It's not anything like what I've experienced with psychedelics. It's different. It's just kind of moving stuff. Moving like this. Sometimes it's black and green, black and red, black and white. It's very active after a couple weeks, very active. It seemed very similar this time as the last time. I haven't experienced any seeing entities or really vibrant. Every so often, maybe less than 10 times over these months, it would be like some little part of the visual screen would be something clear, like clear images, sometimes cartoons, sometimes like a movie or something that didn't really make any sort of sense. I imagine it's just the mind kind of flushing things out. Sometimes there were themes. Sometimes it would be like real sexual, or sometimes it was just be real silly. But that was pretty rare. Most of the time it's just this kind of like pretty grayscale moving back and forth. And after that, getting into it for a few weeks the first time, I don't really give it any mind whatsoever. I don't give it any thoughts. I don't know that there's any real value in giving any energy to it, at least for myself. I assume that it's just the mind projecting onto, emptiness, because the mind is so habituated to be looking at stuff and being active and whatnot that it's doing it. But the visuals, I would say for me, are one of the least important of all. Whether or not they're there, it really wouldn't make any difference in my darkroom, except that as a getting into the meditation, sometimes it can be a little confusing or distracting, because in the meditation, as the mind is getting quieter, I'm using the 6 R's, and so I'm being with the object, or I'm dealing with the feeling of loving kindness, or later I'm just being with the quiet mind. And then if the mind goes off, then I'm bringing it back. But there are these perpetually moving visuals, whether or not I have the eyes open. It's basically the same thing, eyes open or closed. And I would meditate a good amount with the eyes open, probably 60-70% with eyes closed, but a good amount, hours with eyes open. It was no real difference. And so sometimes, because these visuals are moving continually, sometimes slow, sometimes fast, sometimes the mind would get a little confused of, wait, is this a really quiet mind right now, or is it actually really fast? Because it would kind of latch on to that. So in that way, the visuals affected something, but otherwise, not really for me. So for me, these long ones, kind of like similar to a 10-day retreat. These different hindrances arise, or different patterns of the mind. And so this most recent one, these several months, in general, these were the ones that I experienced throughout. So, and this, like I said, sometimes it's pretty similar in a 10-day. Initially, get into the retreat or into the dark room, and the mind is still kind of thinking about whatever was happening outside. So whatever sorts of experience with relationships or whatever was going on. And I had gone into this dark room in the midst of some intense personal experience. And so the mind for a few weeks was really wrapped up in that. And oh, should I be in here? Should I go out? And, all this up and down. And yes, this is the right decision. No, I should be doing this. Back and forth, back and forth. Thankfully, as I said, this practice really assists in letting go of those stories. Also, what I have found in the first days of a 10-day or in first weeks of this, sexual lust and desire comes up strongly. Kind of these more gross, like these more overt, kind of like reactions to being in, like the mind looking for some sort of escape or something. So those fantasies coming up and letting it go, and fantasies coming up and letting it go, or memories or stories or whatever like that. So those would be in the first weeks that I have experienced. Then later there was the focus on money. And this is a classic one, as I said, in the first 7-day, and I remember it coming up strong in the long one, and it came up in this one as well. I've released that story a lot over these years, but still comes up. And initially, it would come up like, first I think was regret, thinking about past things. Oh, I could have invested, could have bought that house, or I could have held on to that house, or I could have invested in this or that back then, and beating myself up about it in some way. Oh, well, if you would have done that, then you would have this money and could buy mom a house, or you could help this person more, or you could do this, that. It's like the mind would say, oh, well, it's good. We're thinking about this in this positive way because it's about helping people, but it doesn't really matter. It's just an untrained mind who's making up these stories and unnecessarily feeling bad about something that, like, that's just life, we can't do everything. There's no right or wrong way, okay, So there was that for a bit, this regret, and that got pretty tiring and pretty exhausting. And at that point in the retreat, I still hadn't gained this ability or the real understanding that came later from these teachings of that's the taking it personal. It's not that these thoughts come up. The thoughts come up, okay, but the feeling tired about it, that's the taking it personal. Yeah, there's thoughts of regret right now because that's an old pattern. And there's fear of running out of money because there's patterns of lack or conditioning of that. Okay, that exists, but the story that, oh, I'm so tired of thinking about this money. Am I doing this again? Really? Oh my gosh, I just want to be done. That's the suffering that's unnecessary. And later in the retreat, listening to some of the different Dhamma talks from Delson and others, it started really sinking in of like, okay, these are coming up. They're just thoughts. They don't mean anything. These are thoughts that have been planted in the past, and now because it's appropriate conditions, they're coming up. And if I give them water, if I give them food by giving them attention, they will stay here and they will replicate. But if I just let them go and let them be there, they might keep coming up for a while because there might be more of those seeds that have been planted. But at some point, they're going to stop coming up. And either way, I'm not going to be feeling bothered by it. And so later, I was able to do that much more. So these thoughts would still be coming up, but I didn't have the story of, my gosh, there must be something wrong. I'm still doing it like this. So the money, sometimes there would be these little thoughts of, let me do this hustle, or let me do this little plan, or figure this out, or even what's the word? Immoral things, like, figure out some little scam or, something like that. Just the mind coming up with things. And in the past, I would have been more worried about it. Well, this is me, my morals are so low. I'm thinking about stealing something or scamming something or something. No, it's just something that got planted in the past. I'm not doing it. I don't do that in life, so I don't need to worry that, there's nothing to worry. It's just coming up. Later came up, interspersed throughout, would be relationships, especially with family, also with some friends. Sometimes it would be strong gratitude, and very often it would be, as I mentioned, some sort of story of bitterness or injustice or unfairness, and kind of looping and spooling on some past experience of, oh, this is not right, or I should explain this so that they see that this is not fair, or something like that. And again, easy to get caught up in that, about saying, well, one, that's true, like I should do that, let me make this plan about doing it. There's that side. Or else there's the other side of like getting bothered by, because it feels tiring if really engage with this, of like, it feels tiring to be angry, it feels tiring to be a victim and to be bitter. That's exhausting, I find. And so if take it personally, that's when it starts getting tiring. If it's just a thought that pops up, just like this tree over here, I don't feel bothered that that's a coconut tree and this is some funky pine sort of tree. I don't feel bothered by that. They just popped up. Well, I can do the same with these thoughts, and then it doesn't feel exhausting anymore. It's just another thing that right now my attention is collected around the phone. I see this tree over here, but it's collected around what the object is right now, which is the phone. Well, if I'm in the meditation and I'm feeling loving kindness and this thought comes up, I'm still collected around the loving kindness, but the thought's over here, just like the tree is over here, but it doesn't really mean anything to me. It doesn't really matter. So that's nice. It feels much nicer. Yeah, of course, throughout the to-do lists and the ideas and the memories of, oh, well, I should do this, or I can talk to that person. And so this time, initially, I was thinking, I'm not going to take an audio recorder in there. Again, I'm just going to do it all hardcore. And I chose to bring in the audio recorder. I'm really grateful that I did, because the Dhamma talks really assisted me. I had about 12 Dhamma talks on there, some from Bhante Vimalaramsi, some from Bhante Ananda, some from Delson. And having 3 different teachers with 3 different energies was really nice, because sometimes maybe I'm feeling a little heavy. I've been trying to force the meditation. I've been really craving getting some deep thing or something, so I'm kind of burnt out. And then I listen to Bhante Ananda, and he's just all happy and just have joy and have fun and laughing, and I'm feeling like, okay, this is nice. And then sometimes I really want to dive deep. Maybe I'll listen to only just like 5 or 10 minutes of it, because it dives so deep. Delson really going in there on fine detail on some deep concept, and I listen for 5 minutes, shut it off, and go meditate for 3-4 hours, and it just kind of is percolating in the background. I'm not consciously thinking about it, but it's there in the background and it's clicking in. And Bhante Vimalaramsi, sometimes he's funny, sometimes he's like more serious, but he has all this experience. So I really enjoyed having these multiple teachers and these Dhamma talks. And like I said, I had about 12 of them, and I listened to each of them probably 2 or 3 times, and then there would be days where I didn't listen to anything. Then on another part of the audio recorder, I recorded different beforehand, and then during I would record different insights or different little principles or things for the meditation or for the darkroom itself, to remind me, and little motivations or little success, like insights from the successes or whatnot, and I re-listen to those every so often. Later, when I began having phone calls or audio messages through the window with the different teachers, I would record those and I would re-listen to those. And then I had one section where I would record things that I wanted to do when I got out. Okay, we can apologize to this person, or we can check in with that person, or we can research this. And so that would be a section. The audio recorder, I had 5 different sections, so I couldn't see it, but it's not hard to figure out where they are. You just play. And then the last section was recording every few days or something. I would do a bit of a check-in. The first long retreat, I did it pretty much every day, and that was one of the ways that I kind of kept myself busy, as well as kind of like boosted my morale, as I would just kind of record for a while. This time it would usually be every few days, and only more so when there was something important, or if in the later stages the practice getting really subtle and really tweaking and refining, and so I wanted to capture that information. So I chose to do the to-dos, or to record the to-dos. And the mind, it can go crazy on all this stuff it thinks of. But some of it is nice. Last time I remember, and same this time, but last time a bunch of different names of people, whatnot, came up, of people that I had in some way hurt or acted in some way unconsciously. And so subsequently, some of them I reached out to directly. Some of them it was just more, me sending like an energetic apology or being aware of how I treated. And that's nice to kind of let that go and to be able to reach out and at least share just a little bit of kind of gracious, apology. Or also forgiveness for some people who I could assume I'd been kind of holding on to something and we hadn't really communicated much. And so just to reach out and let them know, hey, whether or not you feel, anything about, whether or not you even remember what happened, I have been holding on to something, and I want to apologize to that because I let that get in between our relationship, and I'm letting it go, and I hope you're doing well. So with that, as in any period of time, whether it's a week and certainly a month, all of us, I would assume, certainly myself, in just a normal day-to-day life, emotions go up and down. Life experience, day-to-day experience goes up and down. And so being in any sort of retreat or dark retreat is going to be just the same. And so it can feel maybe like, oh, this is so intense or whatever, because of the story that we have in the mind about dark retreats are so intense or something like that. But really, this is just normal. Like, when was the last time that I had a month where every day I woke up just totally amped and totally feeling positive, or totally depressed and totally negative? Everything is anicca, everything is impermanent. And so this happens the same in the darkroom. Certainly have much more clarity on it because I don't have all of the different substances like caffeine or whatever. If I were drinking or using other substances, those are certainly covering up what I'm actually experiencing, and don't have the other ways that keeping busy. So I get to see the emotions much more clearly and be aware of them much more. And to me, that's a great insight of seeing how these change and how they've been changing every day for 39 years. And it's certainly, this practice is assisting me a lot, and previous things that I did assisting me a lot, but I still have a habit of waking up, and if there is some sort of feeling of gloom or something, it's like, oh man, this is the end of the world. Even if it's not that extreme, it's the mind basically saying, how terrible. We feel bad today. And this is so sad and such a big deal, and what a bummer, and it's going to be a bummer of a day. Instead of remembering that it's been experiencing this thousands of days over the course of nearly 4 decades. And this changes every time. Like, we don't need to feel a big deal about it. And so this practice, the Buddha's teaching of everything is impermanent and it's all just impersonal, really assists. And that's that saying that I said of feeling gloomy. What does it feel like without the story? Every morning I would wake up, not every morning, but most mornings I would wake up and I would take refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, which to me is basically, I would say, I take refuge in the Buddha, I now take refuge in the Dhamma, I now take refuge in the Sangha. This, to me, is reminding me, one, that there is this great teacher, the Buddha, who rediscovered this practice, and I'm appreciative. And then the Dhamma, there's this natural law, and so I take refuge that this natural law exists, and if I follow it, I can avoid suffering. And then the Sangha is another Pali word, and it means the group of practitioners, or the monks and nuns. And so I gain confidence and inspiration from them because they're out there doing it, and so they are demonstrating that it's possible for another person like me to do it. So I would take that, and then I would take the 5 precepts, as I've mentioned before, which I'll put all of this down in the notes. And then I would go through some of the different little quotes and things that, like I showed some of those cards, and one of them being the feeling gloomy. What does it feel like without the story? So I would go through these different little notes, and I would pause and I would actually go through them and feel it. And so in the morning, if I'm waking up feeling a little low, then I would pause and I would feel that. What does it actually feel like? And over time, I would recognize, okay, it's not a big deal. Actually, I'm feeling pretty good. There is this little story, but as I recognized that negativity was more and more a story and not like the actual experience, then I was able to let it go more and more. And so this time around, there were certain periods, there was a couple, maybe 3 different periods where there was a couple days in a row where they were just kind of gray. But by the last month, it was pretty much largely upbeat. Every so often, there's, especially in the beginning, you're like, oh, I've got X amount of days left and it feels so heavy. And so the first long retreat, I didn't have as much mental development, and so the mind would get into, well, let me count how many days left until I'm a third of the way through, and how many until halfway, and this and that, do all of these different little things to try and make it feel like it was going quickly. But really what that does is just make it feel like it's going really slow, because it's focusing on what is left. So this time around, whenever the mind started going to how many days are left or whatever, just let it go, let it go. And it got pretty good at that, to where it wasn't that big of a deal anymore. So later in the retreat, as I was saying, I was having these different hindrances. Well, actually throughout the retreat, there would be periods where I'm trying to force it. I'm trying to force the practice. So might experience some sort of deep experience or some jhana or something like that. And so then the next meditation or the next day or two or something, the mind's like, well, I want that again. Let's really try for it. But this practice is all about letting go and accepting. And so it's not about trying and striving. And so that would not work. And that would get exhausting. And the mind would kind of feel bothered by it and whatnot. So when I would recognize that, I would pause. I would stop. I would get up. I would do some sort of physical movement. I didn't do much physical movement this time around. I don't really have a yoga practice. I've never really gotten deep into yoga. That speaking with other darkroom meditators, they say that that's really great. I did do the 6 Tibetan rites, which is sort of like some yoga stretches, and I would do Surya Namaskar, and sometimes I would do some breathing, some Wim Hof or some other ones. And, take a warm shower sometimes, go walking outside, listen to a dhamma talk, sometimes just lay in bed and rest the mind, or lay on the floor or sit on the floor. Just do different things every so often, but the most part, I recognize that I'm here to meditate, and so as long as I'm not forcing it, as long as I'm not in some way burning out or something, then I'm just going to keep meditating. And with that, there would be times for sure where I lay down or I sit down to meditate, and the mind's saying, oh, actually, this is feeling tiresome, I want to be done. And so I would check in and say, well, is this true? Am I starting to burn out or something? But usually that would just be the hindrance of restlessness. And so I would, after a while, get to realize when there is that thought or that temptation to stop, give it 5 minutes, 10 minutes. What I started doing is, when I would feel like, okay, I'm ready to get up and be done, then I would say, okay, I'll get up, but first I'm going to meditate or continue meditating, and I'm going to see how long I can be in that space without the mind really going to any sort of thoughts. Not like see how long as in like keep track of the time, but I'm just going to give real attention and awareness to not having the mind go into different places, and then do that for a while. And very often, even if it was just a couple minutes, and if it was more, then at some point the mind would kind of remember, oh yeah, we were going to get up, and be like, no, actually we're pretty good. That was just the hindrance of restlessness. We're fine. As I have shared, the outside contact really assisted me. Initially, I was not going to do that. I was going to do it all hardcore. And having the contact with the teachers really assisted me. And I had contact with one close friend in the beginning who was going through challenging time, and 2 messages with other friends, and just hearing their voices, that boosted the spirits a little bit. There was the temptation to kind of engage and have a little back and forth dialogue. Mahesh, my friend, would bring the phone to outside of the window, and I could record, or he would record for me, and I would say things. There was that little temptation, but thankfully I didn't go into that, and just maintained the conversations about meditation. But that was still quite a boost. So moving forward, I would do that, and I would actually do more of it for these deep retreats where I'm going into subtle things. I would have more regular, maybe every 5 days or a week or something like that, connection with a teacher who can give more guidance. And so I think that's about it, besides just the macro practice for me, as I have mentioned before, is how am I going about whatever I'm going about? And so, yes, this dark room has a specific purpose, and it feels like it's really important, or it has great potential. And so, yes, I want to give it real full commitment and focus, and I don't want to just do it halfway and, have them giving me the phone every so often and just texting and kind of blowing it off or doing it partially. No, I don't want to do that. But the bigger practice for me is the relationship that I have with myself and how I treat myself. And so there may be some times where I had the phone in the first